Our perceptions of formaldehyde are usually reserved for the end of life, not the beginning.
Honey, will you make me some eggs?
But in Isanti, 2-year-old Jenny may have been exposed to the toxin much earlier.
The rash started at the top of her feet and then went up to her waist, then also around her arms and her neck where the shirt was a little bit tighter and rubbed a lot more.
Katie Heinrich says last summer she bought a toddler outfit from an Old Navy outlet and dressed her daughter without washing it first. Later, she says she noticed a rash where the clothes hugged Jenny's skin.
At first I was worried that it was chickenpox, but it was only where the clothing was touching. It was never really on her belly or her back bad.
After calling the doctor, Heinrich says she did online research, called Old Navy, and asked if the company uses chemicals in clothing.
I talked to one of their customer relations representatives, and he did confirm that they do use formaldehyde in children's clothing.
So Heinrichs thought other parents might want to know more. She asked Care 11 to test her daughter's clothes for formaldehyde. We decided to do that and expand the testing to include other popular kids' clothing brands: Target's Circo brand, Baby Gap, Gymboree, Carter's, and Oshkosh B'gosh. We bought several pairs of leggings similar to the kind Jenny wore, as well as toddler pants and shirts. In all, we shipped 18 baby items to the Analytical Sciences Laboratory in Petaluma, California.
I was surprised, and still am surprised, they use formaldehyde in treating children's clothing.
Lab owner Mark Valentini says formaldehyde-releasing chemicals are commonly put in clothing to prevent wrinkling.
Oftentimes you see it used in things like men's dress shirts.
In more than a dozen countries, formaldehyde in clothes for kids under age 3 cannot exceed a level of 20 parts per million by law. But here in the U.S., there are no regulations. So what did the lab's test results show? 2 of the 18 items exceeded that standard of 20 parts per million. The leggings Jenny wore when her mother says she broke out in the rash, and another pair bought around the same time but not worn by Jenny. 4 others showed trace amounts: the Oshkosh jeans, a Gymboree shirt and pants, and Jenny's shirt. The Circo and Baby Gap items had no detectable formaldehyde in them. Our test seemed in line with a 2010 study by the Government Accountability Office. The GAO tested 180 pieces of clothing and found 10 items with dangerously elevated formaldehyde. At the time, though, the report contained no recommendations.
They just have to keep it within the limits that are safe. And in this case, when she gets a rash, that didn't happen.
Prompted by Care 11's findings, Senator Amy Klobuchar sent a letter to the GAO asking it recommend how the U.S. can regulate formaldehyde in clothes.
And we have to base it on the science, what's a problem. And so far, the industry itself has said that for babies, that the amount should be under 20 parts per million for babies. And in this case, they violated their own standards.
The government study said washing clothes before wearing them can break down formaldehyde levels, but is not always successful. Its experts also said people with allergies should avoid clothing with formaldehyde, but admitted that's difficult when it's not listed on the label. Researchers concluded skin rashes are the greatest risk from clothes containing formaldehyde.
Contact urticaria, which can occur. It's a rare reaction to formaldehyde, and that's probably what happened.
We showed Jenny's rash to dermatologist Scott Prower, who specializes in patients with formaldehyde allergies.
In clothing, it's not harmful to the average person, to everybody who's not allergic to it.
He says only a small patch test can determine a true sensitivity. Jenny didn't have the test because the cost wasn't covered by insurance. But in Minnesota, a group fighting toxic chemicals says the burden of testing shouldn't be on families.
We're really concerned.
The Healthy Legacy Coalition unsuccessfully tried to convince state lawmakers to ban formaldehyde in clothes in the past after their own tests showed it in baby products.
This group sheet is an example of a product that contains formaldehyde to make it look good, to make it look smoother. It's used as a fabric finish.
It is completely unnecessary.
Katie Heinrichs contacted Healthy Legacy with her concerns, and back then the group bought new leggings identical to Jenny's. We included them in our testing. That pair, along with Jenny's leggings, were the 2 that tested the highest. Jenny's at 38 parts per million, twice the amount accepted in other countries. The pair purchased by Healthy Legacy at 120 parts per million, 6 times the standard.
So you wonder, are they really testing these products to make sure that they actually adhere to their own standards?
So at the state capitol this spring, Minnesota became the first state to take a stance on formaldehyde. Starting next year, manufacturers can no longer add it to baby soaps, shampoos, and lotions. Still, it's not enough for Heinrichs,
I think it's unbelievable.
who says Old Navy investigated her concerns but denied any negligence. She still believes formaldehyde belongs back in those bottles at the funeral home, far from her daughter's clothes. In Isanti, Lindsay Sievert, KARE 11 News.